Imagine a new kind of investing, a potentially life-changing way to invest that honors biblical principles, the kind of principles that you and I grew up with. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has made biblically responsible investing possible, offering mutual funds and ETFs that are filtered for biblical principles. Don't compromise your values. Invest with Timothy Plan. Ask your financial advisor or call Timothy Plan at 1-800-TIM-PLAN. Again, that's 1-800-846-7526 and discover what it means to be a biblically responsible investor. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing. Mutual funds distributed by Timothy Partners Ltd. and ETFs distributed by Foreside Fund Services LLC. As a paid testimonial, there is no guarantee of future performance and each experience will differ. Yep, it's time for another MemoPod. Great to have you with us. And yeah, if you're all you can see is the crap there. And I know that's not a good word in some of you's homes, but this is my 4th of July shirt that I wore here. Can you see it? How do I need to turn there? Crap, that's due tomorrow. Thomas Jefferson, July 3rd, 1776. You know what would be appalling to me? Here's what would be appalling. It would be appalling to me how many students that I have in school would not be able to get that joke. In fact, I think I'm going to try that. I think I'm going to wear this shirt one day. And I know we're supposed to dress up, but I'm going to take one day and not dress up. And I'm going to give a quiz. How many of you get this? Explain it to me on a half sheet of paper right now. And I bet you and I both would be stunned at the number of kids that would not understand. You know what kind of alarms me right now? Kind of alarms me how many of you don't get this. So maybe you need to submit, either in the comments below or via email, why this is a funny shirt. It was kind of awkward at my family get-together for the 4th of July. I'm not sure my father-in-law got it. But he's like 6'4". He's a big dude. So I didn't push it. I'm not an idiot. Anyway, glad that you're with us. I need to make you all aware of this right now, just so you know you're going to not get a MemoPod next week. Okay? I'll try to make it up to you in a following week with something just really nice. But here's why. Because now that I'm not teaching summer school, June is done. In July, my family, Jenny and I, planned a family road trip. So we're taking the family, renting a van, and we're going. Right before we do that, Jenny and I are going to go to Gettysburg. And so I'll have plenty to say about that, I'm sure, after we go to Gettysburg. I've never been there. I'm very excited about it. So we're going to do that. But then the family is all going to... I'm not taking the kids to Gettysburg. I want to enjoy that. And there's no way I'm going to enjoy it with them. It's too hot. All we're looking at is the field. All of that stuff. Someday, I hope that they'll appreciate it. We are not yet to that day. And so I'm going to appreciate it. Anyway, and then we're going on a road trip. And because of that, I just didn't want to take the computer and do work while we're on the family trip. Number one, because I want to be invested with family. And number two, I know how things are in the car with my family. And this was Jenny's idea, okay? It was Jenny's idea. We've never taken an actual road trip. We've flown places, but we've never gotten in a vehicle and ridden for hours and hours in the vehicle. I said, right, but you know what it's like driving 35 minutes to go to a nicer restaurant. You know what that's like. So I don't know about this 7 hours. But anyway, we'll see. We're going to go down the eastern seaboard and see some stuff. So I will report back. But because of that, there'll be no MemoPod next week. Now, you will have a memo, those of you who are paid subscribers. You'll get the memo, and you will still get the Bible teaching that comes out. But as far as the MemoPod, you will be MemoPodless next week. This week, couple things that I wanted to discuss. First of all, for all of us, let's talk a little bit about 2024, the presidential election. I understand right now that there's two different camps when it comes to conservatives. There's the MAGA camp of conservatives who say unfinished business, Donald Trump needs to be the nominee. We need a revenge tour 2024. And they are adamant. You got a group of them that believe that he was the rightful winner in 2020. And so this is making things right. And that needs to happen. Okay? Then you got another subset of you over here that are saying, thank you, Donald Trump, for what you've done in the past. We need to move on. Because you're too polarizing of a figure. We need independence. We cannot independence, as in a group of people who are independent in their voting registrations and all of that, their voter identification. And we need to win them, and you will not win them. And so we can't mess around with that. This is too serious of an hour. We have to move forward. So, depending on the two groups, if you're in this group over here, you're going to cite polling data that shows Donald Trump losing ground with independents. You're going to point to polling data that shows him losing to Joe Biden in a potential head-to-head matchup. Okay, those are the polls that you'll point to. If you're in this group over here, you're going to, and you believe this should be Trump's time, you're going to point to the polls that show him up 50% to 22% over the closest competitor in the Republican primary, Ron DeSantis, and say, it's over. It's over. We need to move forward. So let's take at face value that Donald Trump is the preeminent favorite for the Republican nomination. I want to tell you how I think he wins the nomination in 2024, the Republican nomination, not the presidency, wins the Republican nomination, and I want to tell you how I think he loses the Republican nomination. Because if we trust what we're being told, this is his to lose. So how does he win it? How does he clinch it? How does he lose it? That's what we're going to do here in just a second. For those of you who are paid subscribers and you get the full MemoPod, after the break, there's two things that I want to dive into. Thing number one, I coined not that other people haven't had similar ideas, but I coined the acronym in a column I wrote not too terribly long ago, LTKA, that I am an LTKA activist, which stands for Leave the Kids Alone. Okay? And so I have an update on that front and a further appeal as to why people need to join this movement. Okay? And it's not restricted just to conservative Christians. Surely this is an issue where most all of us can agree. And I also want to get into, there was a bevy, a plethora, if you've seen Three Amigos, a plethora of Supreme Court decisions that came down recently, and the left went apoplectic. I saw Mehdi Hassan, who's on MSNBC, the guy railing against the out-of-control court. How can Congress enact a law and the president sign it and the court strike it down as unconstitutional? Who do these people think they are? It is amazing how the two sides have flipped. Conservatives for the longest time railed against the activist court that was out of control and doing all this stuff. And the left that was using the courts to advance their agenda, they're totally fine with it. Flip-flop. Flip-flop. That's what's happened. But there's so many different cases. I want to look at the affirmative action one. And I want to share with you what I think were the worst takes on that Supreme Court striking down racism in college admissions. Supreme Court says, no, racism is not going to be allowed by universities. We're not going to allow it. That is unconstitutional. And the left went nuts. I want to share with you some of the worst takes, and you'll never believe the number two and the number one worst take on that decision. Okay, that comes up after the break. But let's start here with all of you here on the MemoPod. Let's start with President Trump, considered in many quarters to be a shoo-in for the Republican nomination in 2024. Now, that may prove to be the case. I'm not going to even at this point tell you which of these two camps I'm in. Some of you know. I'm not going to tell you even if I'm in this camp over, which side was it? Was it this side that was the we need somebody new? Even if I'm in this camp, and some of you may think that I'm in that camp, even if I'm in this camp, do I think that someone new will be chosen, or do I think it'll be Trump? None of that is necessary to reveal at this point in time. I will tell you, regardless of which camp I'm going to be in, I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for Donald Trump. I don't. And I know what the polls say right now. I do not think it's going to be a cakewalk. I believe there's at least a handful of candidates, believe it or not, a handful that have an outside shot at the nomination. Now, for some of them, it's a very long shot. And I'll probably do a MemoPod in the future that says how each of these guys or girls can win the nomination. That's not what this is, though. This is about Donald Trump himself. I think that, regardless of the fact that I believe other candidates have the ability to win the nomination, I think that Donald Trump largely controls his own destiny. I do. Now, I may not wish that that was the case. I may wish that this was a foregone conclusion for Trump, or I may wish that no matter what Trump does, the Republicans are moving on. I might wish either of those two things, but I believe the reality is that Trump will control his own destiny. So, how does he win and how does he actually lose the nomination? Again, I'm talking about the nomination for the Republican ticket, not winning the presidency. I think that's a different calculation. Okay? So, here's how Trump wins. If Trump is on the ballot, he's going to have the incumbent's advantage. That's what conventional wisdom will say. I think that what's going to have a larger say is the mood of the Republican electorate. If voters on the right are feeling vengeful, if they're feeling angry, that's going to be a Trump victory. Nobody is going to tap into that more than Donald Trump. The Biden administration continues to be an international embarrassment, and it continues to devolve and get worse and worse and worse. And because of that, there is plenty of reason for voters to be enraged. And I think Trump wins if his promise to be the embodiment of the right's retribution, if it sells. If he's able to carry forth the and he can discipline himself, and I think that's going to be a big thing for Donald Trump. If he can discipline himself into this whole "they hate me because they hate you" messaging, if he can tap into that, I think the anger and the emotion that sadly defines our politics today, I think it carries him to a much easier victory in the Republican states. I also believe that Trump wins if he is able to keep his showmanship that he exhibited in 2016, if he can keep that fresh, if it doesn't get stale with people, and I'm talking the nicknames, I'm talking the low energy Jeb, and just being able to take apart his competitors and appear to be the outsider, if he can keep that fresh. And here's what I mean. I saw this statistic out there. The number of voters for whom policy positions don't matter as much as charisma. Donald Trump once said it's all about the ratings. I mean, to the degree that it is, that's an advantage to Donald Trump. I don't know that it's an advantage to conservatism, but it's an advantage to Donald Trump in this election. If it's about revenge or if it's about ratings, I believe Trump is the candidate in 2024. That's how he wins. Remember those two R's. If it's about revenge, Trump's going to be the guy. If it's about ratings and charisma and humor and all of that stuff, then Trump wins the nomination. I'm not saying the presidency, the nomination. So, how does Donald Trump actually lose the nomination? Okay. So, like, political scientists, and I know they're a dime a dozen. I would technically be considered, because I have a master's degree in political science, I would technically be considered a political scientist. Right. So, take it all with a grain of salt. All right? I'm telling you, there's nothing up here that you all don't have yourselves. Just the way it is. The only difference is I have a piece of paper because I paid somebody to let me read a bunch of books and then write essays as to what it is that I read and pass some tests. All right? So many of you may have keener political sense than me. So take the term, the title of political scientist a little bit with a grain of salt, all right? But most political scientists will agree that when it comes to Donald Trump's biggest enemies, start listing them off. The swamp, the establishment, the left, the media, whatever it is. Biggest enemy for Donald Trump? Yeses? Right. Donald Trump. He is his own biggest enemy. I see ways that Donald Trump can lose. 3 ways that Donald Trump loses this. By the way, I don't know when this started, doing it this way. Like most people do three ways. And I used to be a 3 ways. But at some point, I got hooked on this. But then again, isn't this like the sign of white supremacy now? So maybe I shouldn't use that. I refuse to believe that this is a sign of white supremacy. It's the okay sign. But anyway, 3 ways. 3 ways, whichever you prefer, that Donald Trump can lose this nomination, and I believe all of them are within his control. First, he is, like it or not, the de facto leader of the Republican Party. That's what Donald Trump is at this particular moment. The odds that the opposition party, the Democrats, will successfully prosecute him and put him behind bars, I think it remains very slim. Because the optics alone, I'm surprised that Joe Biden has allowed it to go forward. Sorry, Joe Biden's not in charge. I mean, he's the figurehead. But whichever posse or group of people or person is actually running the show. Maybe we've got an Edith Wilson thing going and Dr. Jill Biden is the one that's doing it. I don't know. But whoever it is that's running it for the Democrats, I think they're making a little bit of a miscalculation in letting this go as far as it's gone. So I don't think they're going to continue to pursue it to the point of trying to put Donald Trump in jail. But if Donald Trump cannot stop giving interviews, he may end up putting himself there. Let me show you a little bit about what I'm talking about. Take a look at this.
So now that we've heard this recording, does that undercut what you told Bret Baier just a week ago?
I said it very clearly. I had a whole desk full of lots of papers and mostly newspaper articles, copies of magazines, copies of different plans, copies of stories having to do with many, many subjects. And what was said was absolutely fine and very, very perfectly. We did nothing wrong. This is a whole hoax. This is just like the Russia deal. This is like the fake dossier. The dossier was a fake. It's all been a big fake. Ukraine. We went through these things ad nauseum, and this is 7 years of this stuff, and now this one. And the one who's done it wrong is Biden. He has 850 boxes all over the place. Nobody even knows where they are. He's got many boxes in Chinatown, D.C. What are they doing there? And he's accepting money from China. He's got boxes all over the place. I'm covered by the Presidential Records Act. I'm covered also by the Clinton Sox case. It's a very important case. It's law. And we did absolutely nothing wrong. This is just another hoax. It's called, I would say, election interference more than anything else. It's a disgrace that they can do it. Next question. But everything was fine. We did nothing wrong, and everybody knows it.
You're not concerned then with your own voice on those recordings?
My voice was fine. What did I say wrong on those recordings? I didn't even see the recording. All I know is I did nothing wrong. We had a lot of papers stacked up. In fact, you could hear the rustle of the paper, and nobody said I did anything wrong other than the fake news, which, of course, is Fox, too.
See, that's what I'm talking about. That's not good. There's no reason for Donald Trump to be talking about this stuff, and certainly saying things like that, making this so much more difficult on his attorneys. And that was bad. This is not good. But neither is this.
Ever get this stuff, this back, would be please, could we have it back?
And they
please,
asked for that.
because they have no.
They did ask for it.
No,
and they said, "Can you give the documents back?"
And we were talking.
And then they said they went to DOJ to subpoena you to get them
Which
back.
they've never done before.
Right.
And in
But
all
why not
fairness,
just hand them over then?
Because I had boxes. I want to go through the boxes and get all my personal things out. I don't want to hand that over to Nara yet. And I was very busy, as you've sort of seen.
Yeah, but
I've been
according to
very,
the
very
indictment,
busy.
you then tell this aide to move to other locations after telling your lawyers to say you'd fully complied with the subpoena when you hadn't.
But before I send boxes over, I have to take all of my things out. These boxes were interspersed with all sorts of things.
I mean, it's getting to the point where Trump is going to have a hard time finding attorneys who want to continue to try, who are going to sacrifice their own credibility to try to defend him when he's constantly changing what their argument is. Does that make sense? Like they decide on a defense, but then Trump does an interview where he totally undermines it by something that he says. And so then the attorneys have to pivot and say, no, that's not what we were saying, and that's not what he was saying. And then they try to craft something together to make sense out of what was said and have a new defense. There's going to come a point where attorneys are either unwilling or at least unable to do that. All right? That's one way Donald Trump loses this nomination, if he doesn't stop giving interviews about stuff and trying to put himself behind bars. Number two, the second way is if Donald Trump starves himself of oxygen. Okay? I don't mean that like literally, although that too would prevent him from winning the nomination if he suffocated himself. But what I mean is politically suffocate himself. Go back to what we said is one of the ways that Trump wins. His charisma, his showmanship. That is his lifeblood. There isn't a person out there that believes Donald Trump is a policy wonk. There's not a person out there that thinks that Donald Trump, I shouldn't say that. There are some people, true believers, that think Donald Trump is always playing like 4D or 6D chess. But very few people actually think that Donald Trump is a strategic thinker. No, one of the things they like about him is that he's not, that he just says what's ever on the top of his mind. There are very few, if any, people out there that believe that Donald Trump is this paragon of presidential statesmanship. That's not why Donald Trump gets support. He gets support because he is charismatic and a showman. That's it. And he excites people on the right. They love to see him stick it to other people, whether those other people are Republicans who stand opposed to him, or whether it's Democrats, or whether it's the media. But I repeat myself, Democrats, media. Anyway, that's what they want. So when I see clips and announcements, Caitlin Collins, the reporter, had this story, this blurb, that Donald Trump is thinking that he's going to skip the first Republican presidential debate. Okay, I get why he says he's going to do that. I understand the theory behind it, because he is the front runner, so why let them attack him? Just let them tear each other to shreds. But those theories, that's based on an old school understanding of presidential politics. It's reserved for traditional politicians, right? It's reserved for somebody like Jeb Bush, who doesn't have much to gain by showing up for those debates. Or Joe Biden, if you're the Democrat. No, you're not going to debate RFK. What do you have to gain? Nothing, but you got a lot to lose. But the problem for Donald Trump is he's not like a traditional politician. He needs those debates. That's what gives him life. He needs to banter and he needs to bicker. He plays into his rival's hands when he takes himself off the debate stage. So if he does that and starves himself of oxygen, and I know he says that he'll hold another event. Do you think, and maybe Fox News would cover it instead of the presidential debate, but I doubt it. And I doubt that the other networks are going to do that. I don't think there'll be as much coverage of it. And especially if the other Republicans are landing body blows on Donald Trump, I don't see how he does stay out of it. But if he tries to, he could lose the nomination that way. And third, if Trump gets stubborn about COVID, and I think he will. So I think this is maybe the gravest threat to Donald Trump. It is not in Donald Trump's DNA to admit that he made a mistake. It's not. But enough is now known from the era of COVID about the medical establishment that Donald Trump himself empowered and enabled, that I think this is a time for an exception. If I was advising Donald Trump, not that I think he would listen to me, but if I was a political advisor, if I was running his campaign or advising his campaign, I would say, come out and read this statement. Come out and say, no one would have ever thought that the medical establishment would be so dishonest. And I'll admit, I didn't think they would be. I trusted them, and I made a mistake in trusting them in my desire to protect you. That's why I trusted them, because this was unknown, and I believed that these were good people with brains in their head who would follow the basic protocols, the basic scientific process for doing things, but power went to their heads. And so I'm telling you, my desire to protect you is as strong as it ever has been. But my trust in them has been destroyed. Just as your trust in them has been destroyed, it is time for a complete reset in the National Institute for Health and in the CDC. Elect me and you'll get that. Because I was the one who was burned. And so I'm going to go in and clean house. He says that. I don't think any Republican's going to touch him. I'm serious. I don't think any Republican's going to touch him if that became what he said. If he accepted blame for trusting the medical establishment, but then buried the medical establishment by saying, they betrayed all of our trusts, including mine, and if you empower me, trust me, I'm ready. I'm ready to go in there and clean house. Because I'm scorned by what they did. If his rivals make COVID a major issue in the primary, that's what Donald Trump has to do. I think his rivals will make COVID a major issue. Why wouldn't they? And if they do, this, I'm going to roll a clip here for you. This being Donald Trump's position isn't going to cut it. This is how he loses the nomination.
So it is a big part of that spending, COVID. Do you have regrets about how you handled that? Because some of your opponents are now running these loops of where you say you shut down the country.
We had to artificially close our country.
We did just the right thing. We closed it down. We understood the disease.
We closed the country down. We studied it. We learned about it.
Some people wish we never closed it down. We did the right thing. Everything we did was right.
All right. I just don't think that's going to do it. I don't think it's going to do it, and I think his poll numbers are going to drop, and I think he'll get more bitter about the whole thing. And when Donald Trump gets bitter, he digs in his heels. And I think that is the potential pitfall for him in the nomination process. So, look, the script is only beginning right now to be written. There's many more pages that are going to be written. And if there is one thing about politics, it's that it's unpredictable. I don't know what's going to happen. But to me, right there, that's how Donald Trump wins, and that's how Donald Trump loses the nomination in 2024. All right. Some of you aren't that into politics, so sorry, but it's significant. It impacts our lives. You let me know what you think. Is this Trump's nomination to lose? Are you ready? Which camp are you in? If you're a conservative Republican, which camp? The all Trump all the time, or time for somebody new? Do you agree with my assessment? All of that you can put in the comments right down there, okay? Or email me directly, peter@peterheck.com. That's peter@peterheck.com. This is unfortunately where I have to say goodbye to those of you who are free subscribers. Would love to have you give us a shot and try it out. Get the full MemoPod. Get the memo that's sent to you each week, the Bible teaching that's sent to you each week. Just give us a shot. You can sign up at peterheck.com. You put your email address in there, and bam, it'll say upgrade to paid. And you can give it a shot and stop if you don't like it. That's it. And some of you have tried that. I will not be telling you if those that are trying it are stopping or not. That would be humiliating if they were stopping. But anyway, so would love to have you try it out. But if not, that's cool too. But those of you who are paid subscribers, hang on through the break. We'll talk about my LTKA movement, Leave the Kids Alone, and also the worst takes on the Supreme Court's decision relative to affirmative action. All of that happens. And remember, free subscribers, no MemoPod next week. Okay? I'm on the road trip. Prayers appreciated. And I'll see you the week after that.
The Memo with Peter Heck.
Please patronize and thank all the sponsors of the Heck podcast, including McGonigal's Buick GMC, Terrell's Auto Service, Norris Insurance, Stevens Machine, Creative Financial Center, Indiana Right to Life, Tri-Green Tractor, the Indiana Family Institute, Hartman Family Farms, Liberty Financial Group, the Wyman Group, and J. Watson Creations.